Hey everybody, today I'm super excited to have Mary Lynn Henry here for an interview. She's been in the industry for over 45 years. She started as a casting director and now she works as a career coach and she trains actors. She's guided thousands of actors into successful film, TV, and theater careers. And she co-wrote an amazing book called How to Be a Working Actor, which, if you haven't read it, is an absolute must-read. I just had the opportunity to read through it all, and it literally answers any question that an actor might have. And Mary Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited.
I'm very happy to be with you, Martin.
Awesome. Well, I have some questions that I'd like to go through. But first, before we do that, I'd like if you're open to telling us a little bit about your work, how you got started, what got you interested in casting, directing work, and then how you kind of transitioned into what you do now. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the things that you're proud of in your career.
Well, of course, I've had a long career with many different chapters. But first of all, I was trained to be an actress. I had a speech and drama major at San Jose State University and pursued graduate theater work at Catholic U in Washington, D.C. While at those schools, I played a variety of roles from Shakespeare, etc. And my goal was to get to New York City and, wow them. Says she. Of course, I came to New York because that had always been my goal, being raised in California. Most of us want to come here because it's the central place of theater and can fulfill your ambition, possibly, to be a working actor. But along the way, I got involved with what a lot of actors do when they first come here is get temp work. And in my case, I had done some production work with a public TV station in D.C. that kind of got me into the ad agency arena for the temp offices to route me in the production offices of those ad agencies. And in particular, one of my colleagues from the university, from Catholic U, said, you might just want to come to Cunningham and Walsh Advertising because, first of all, you won't have to pay a fee to a temp agency, and it'll give you some footing into the business. And I thought, that's a good idea. I did that, and that led to my becoming an assistant casting director to Maxine Marks, the daughter of Chico Marks of the famed Marx Brothers.
Oh, wow.
And of course, for 9 years, Martin, there was never a dull moment. But I will tell you this. I learned how to cast. I learned the kind of talent that was out there. I learned what to expect from that talent. And that was all in the 1970s. Well, another colleague of mine, this is why keeping your alumni network in your pocket is very important, to constantly remind people you're out there. And so one of my fellow alumni from Catholic U was a big deal at ABC Network, and they were looking for an in-house casting executive. She referred me to the guy who was in personnel and human resources. I did the interviews and I got the job. And I was told specifically, don't tell people that you know somebody at ABC because they'll think it's nepotism.
Yeah.
Well, of course, when I met the lady from California who was the head of all casting for ABC, she said, I understand you know so-and-so, meaning my friend who referred me. So you can't keep secrets from people. They'll find out. But it all worked out in the long run. And for over 13 years, I had a great deal of fun and challenge by being in charge of the soap operas for ABC. But that means executive position in the network, not meaning on-site casting, which some people get confused about. On-site casting means every studio had a casting director in place. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm proud to have been in the company of such wonderful women and gentlemen who presided in those casting offices, all with great taste, with great reverence for the profession, and cast some amazing actors during the time at ABC. And then, of course, we left, we, meaning the generic we, me and me, left ABC and said, okay, let's see, what am I going to do now? Now, all along, my co-author Lynn Rogers and I had been writing How to Be a Working Actor, because we started the journey in 1986. So imagine this, you just read it. You read the 5th edition, Martin.
Yeah.
It's still out there 33 years later, so I'm very proud of that accomplishment, and I consider that kind of a milestone, because a book doesn't last long if the reader doesn't read it, or if the reader isn't interested in it. Apparently, it's had some nice longevity. So that basically brings us a little more up to date. I still continue to do one-on-one coaching with actors, especially for their presentation skills and packaging and their promotional materials. And I also teach at different places in town. I do seminars, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to bore you too much. We don't have enough time for a long life lived, but I think those are the high points. And now I was approached by a publisher last year to write a new book. So that's what I'm working on now.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for that to come out. Can you tell everybody just a teeny bit about that and what the title is?
Well, I wanted to do a legacy book. First of all, the title of it is The Total Actor. And so that encompasses a lot of different aspects of being the actor. The subtitle is a career guide to survival, success, and heritage. Now, part 1 is the survival and success section. Part 2 is about heritage. And when I say heritage, I mean the theater history that we stand upon, that we learn from, that's not being taught in schools these days. It's shocking for me to find out that anyone would never have heard of Sarah Bernhardt, but unbelievably, I found a young actress in training a few years back who thought Sarah Bernhardt was the Jewish comedian Sandra Bernhard. And then I realized I had some work to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's pretty shocking. If you're an actor, I think you should know about your history. I think you should know about the evolution of great stage actors to the 20th century, to the silent film era, to the talkies. Thank God that we have some of these films where the great actors had roles, and we can watch them on screen, and we can hear their great voices and diction, which unfortunately I find to be the biggest problem with today's actors if they don't get the proper speech training. But that's another story. I'm just saying that heritage is a very important part of my life. I founded the Society to Preserve Theatrical History, and I want to live up to that title.
Yeah. It's actually funny that you mentioned the voice thing, because that was talked about in your book, and I was just kind of organizing the questions here because I have a lot of questions and I want to focus on the best ones, I think. But I did have a question, like you talked about how high-pitched or whiny or inaudible monotone voices, they kind of announce an amateur actor. So if you don't mind, talk a little bit about that, like as a casting director, how are they actually judging an actor's voice when they come into the room, and how does that play a part?
Thank you for that question, by the way. Because speech is the most important part of the audition. If you can't be understood, if you can't articulate the writer's words with the proper rhythms and intonations, if you don't understand the oral interpretive aspects of what you're reading, and also because you slur and no one can hear you, you're not going to get much of a second chance. So what I espouse is that every actor, first of all, I was lucky. In my day, there was something called speech and drama. Then they started taking the speech out of the major and kind of made it a general theater arts major. And then it sort of morphed into a communication major. But Northwestern University for years in Illinois was famous for its oral interpretation program, started by a woman named Alvina Krauss. And everybody from the 19th century on knew the value of speech. I just did a piece on the great Ellen Terry when she was a young girl in a theater family. She would take lessons in a theater that was from some of the teachers that they hired to train the acting company. Now, Martin, I don't know your background as an actor, but when I was in speech class, we would always start by saying A-E-I-O-U. And we would keep doing that for our mouth muscle, for the whole palate area, etc., to be understood. Those were the vowels. You had to start with your vowels, and then you went to the consonants, and then you were able to articulate and pronounce correctly. Mm-hmm. No slipshod fashion, as Ellen Terry used to say, and her father was an elocutionist, so she grew up with good speech. But if you're going to do Shakespeare, for example, if you're being called in for an audition, let's say for Lady Macbeth, you have got to project with clarity. Mm-hmm. Clarity brings you confidence. That means that the director, whoever is watching your audition, is impressed with the fact that you understand what you are saying. But if you come in, as you put it, with the whiny and the high pitch and all of that, there is no confidence there. There is no clarity there, and you look weak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, actually, just before we go into the next question, I just wanted to... I personally am actually not an actor. I started in film directing and I do headshot photography, but I got so interested in doing this, like, you know, marketing stuff for my own interest in business, and I love working with actors. And so, like, you know, the opportunity to work with actors, that's actually what my background is. So I'm actually not an actor. But I find all of this stuff so interesting, and this...
Well, if you know something, though, every successful person has had to work hard. Mm-hmm. So if you come in with lazy speech, we know you haven't worked hard enough.
Yeah.
And you're not ready to audition. And you've got to know what the essentials are, and the essentials are body, mind, and voice, period. So if you feel that you need more confidence in your career, then you seek the best coaches, the best training programs, the conservatories that are out there, the independent teachers that are out there, who are all trying to help you get stronger as an actor, hopefully with the pathway to a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that leads me into this question, which is like, you know, the surrounding part around the actual audition, which is the whole casting process. How, like, it's very important, in my opinion, that actors understand the casting process in more detail. Most of them just kind of like, oh, I know how to audition, but how important do you feel it is for actors to, like, really know, like, the beginning, middle, and end, and all the work that the casting director goes through, and, you know, how that actually works? Do you feel that's very important?
I think they should understand the role of the casting director in terms of their future, specifically because the casting directors are the hardest working people I know. Mm-hmm. I mean, they don't get a percentage like agents do. They are there to fulfill the needs of whatever project they're working on, whether it's a film, a TV series, a commercial, whatever it is. And so they have to, first of all, they have to be dedicated to the theater. That's my first thing. I come from theater, so that was an easy transition for me to make from being in graduate school and then going into a casting office, because I love talent, and Maxine Marks loved talent, and we would bring in all kinds of people for all different kinds of requirements. Every commercial had a different set of family members, or let's say a cosmetic commercial needed a beautiful model. I mean, we handled everything, and that really gives you a wide range of information about who the better people are, who the best people are, and who are the ones that you're not going to bring back. Because there's always going to be somebody better than you. I mean, that's just the rule of nature. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be competitive, then you have to really work harder. So we have to keep an impersonal eye. It's not something, oh yeah, my aunt's niece is an actress and I think she should get that part. That is not how it works. But I think that the actors should know that casting directors are not their enemy if they don't get a call back. So much is riding on every audition that some paranoia paranoia can get in the way. You know, oh, they didn't like me. Oh, I knew when I walked in the door they didn't look at me, or whatever the excuse is for not getting the call back. But here's the deal: you do the best preparation you can for every audition you go on, because the casting director is not there during your preparation. The casting director is the result of your preparation when you come in for the audition experience. And by the way, that applies to auditioning for any schools that you're going to have to audition for further training, because a lot of those people are vetted actors who are in the room seeing who's the perfect fit for their training program. So there are a whole lot of things at stake here. And therefore, the more that you learn, the better your audition is going to be. And that starts with the way you come into the room. A lot of people don't think about that, you know? But during my tenure, I used to see people absolutely flummoxed when they came in. Oh my Lord, their hair was mussed, their backpacks were slipping off their shoulder, the outfit they wore was kind of slovenly or just kind of thrown together, not pressed. And I'm going, you know, this is your first impression on anyone. And the caveat here is, be the best you can be from the time you walk into that room to the time you leave that room. You may not get a call back. There may be reasons why, but you don't care about those reasons. You just know you did the best audition you could. And the outcome here that you hope for is there'll be a good report to the agent from the casting office, because obviously casting offices do get calls from agents, how did my client do? Or there'll be notes taken by the casting director on every actor he or she sees, and they might tuck you away for a future kind of role. This may not have been the perfect fit, but there could be something that comes up that would be better. So all of these things a casting director has to constantly be thinking about, always finding the new face. What technology has done to casting is that it becomes more accessible by looking on the internet and trolling different sites, and that's how some talent is so-called discovered. That doesn't always mean that from just seeing them on a YouTube or seeing them on a self-sent audition tape that's the end-all and the be-all. That's just a little bit of an impression. But it's what you get when you deliver the goods coming into the room and face people. It can be very scary. Trust me on this one.
It's funny that you're talking about, I mean, this interview is kind of going perfectly, because my next question was actually going to be about some of these specific things that actors do, like based on how they look. Like we talked about their voice and everything, but like something that you noted in your book was when casting directors make notes, it's often the color or clothing you're wearing. And I found that really interesting. And then another thing, like you said learn how to apply makeup before auditions. Like men should be wearing some sort of makeup, and I thought that was interesting. You must look great and understand style very well. Just some of these things. I mean, if you want to talk a little bit more about that, I'd love to hear it.
Well, no, that's just let me talk about men and makeup.
Yeah.
The only reason that a man would apply any kind of concealer, like just something that matches the skin tone, is, for one thing, if he gets an early beard during the day and doesn't have a shaver with him. Or he takes a shaver with him and he just takes off the 5 o'clock stubble. That would be it. Or maybe a little powder, and this is really for camera, not so much for in person. I wouldn't suggest that a man wears makeup before he goes for a live audition. I would suggest, though, that if he sweats a little bit, he should always know that maybe a little bit of powder can just blot it down. Or that if, you have some lines or dark circles under your eyes, that's not a gender thing, that's everybody gets that, how you can make that look better. What you cannot do is remove a mole. Any kind of, skin problem.
Yeah.
And you as a photographer know this, you should know that too, that, you'll get women who have some, like, breakouts on their faces. And they should never go into a photographer session with a breakout, because that's a raised kind of like a pimple or something like that they can't really get rid of. And so I do recommend certain cosmetic procedures if needed. And please understand me, if needed.
Yeah.
Not just frivolous things to make you look 10 years younger when you're already 40 and you want to look 30. I'm not talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should all age gracefully. But there are little tricks of the trade that you can apply. You keep a little bit of makeup on in your bag, and you go to the restroom and you apply a fresh coat of lipstick, or just, maybe something is faded, you put a little more rouge on the cheek, just very natural, minimal makeup for women. But the important thing, we talk about colors. Colors complement skin tones. Colors add vibration, energy when you walk in the room. And so I have studied color since 1991. I have been an advocate for the best colors to wear for auditions, live and taped. And I think some people will read that and go, oh no, I don't look good in purple. And I'm going, everybody, no matter what their hair color or skin tone is, looks good in purple. It depends on the shade, it depends on the tint, it depends on the hue. You have to look, and you have to go when you go shopping. Shop for your professional wardrobe. Don't leave it to the last minute. We have sales now everywhere. People can find just a solid jewel. I talk about jewel tones a lot. Just a solid royal blue, or a beautiful green, or maybe even a blue red, which I call blue reds are like ruby, like emerald is green because it's a jewel. So these are the things that I outline in the book. They're all there. And yes, there was an episode where an actress came in to a room full of people to read some copy for a commercial audition. She was wearing a very lovely pink, not too light. You don't want light because it'll wash out, but a very vibrant pink color blouse. Mm-hmm. And, like a raspberry color, let's put it that way. And so she did a very good read, but a lot of times people in the room don't put down the name of the person who's reading. They've got a list supplied by the casting director, but that doesn't, or they'll look at the resume, and then they'll figure out who was who after the session's done. But for this girl, because she was really good and she really did a good job, but what sealed the deal was the color she wore. Everybody loved it. It looked so good on her, and they remembered it. Because you remember color. You don't remember black and white and gray and brown and all the dull colors. You remember the vibrant tones. So that's one way to trigger memory. That's why we wrote that extensively.
Yeah, I love that part. I mean, that's if there's a reason to pick up the book, I mean, for the price, you can't go wrong when there's this much information. Even just that one little section about color is worth like 10 times more than the cost of the book.
But Martin, I've expanded on it, because in the new book, which won't be published till March of 2020, but in the new book, I went beyond clothing colors and went into the psychology of color. So that every color is relevant to key qualities, emotional qualities, physical stuff, and spiritual connection. And so that when you look at that in preparing for an audition, you can find the colors in the scene you're doing. You can find the color template in your character that you're auditioning with. Every character has a different color scheme. So it all goes together, in other words. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's very exciting. All right, so I do have one other really quick question related to the look of the person when they come into the audition, and it's related to like working out. Like you mentioned, that actors should have some sort of gym membership. They should take care of themselves, and also like teeth and taking proper care of their teeth. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when we talk about body, mind, and voice, and we look at the body tells us a lot about a person when they walk in the room. We all know, that during Christmas they gain 10 pounds. I mean, you can't hide it. The whole point is, though, you've got to keep in good physical shape just for your stamina, just for your energy. Now, I know so many people who are actors or performers, and they do have the discipline to do a daily regimen or just jogging. I've seen young people jogging on my sidewalk. They jog everywhere. Plus bike riding, plus all the other things that young folks should be doing to keep themselves in shape. This is just part of what you need for your pictures, what you need for even being considered, because if you look at television and if you look at films and how the women were cast, a lot of it is physical type. So I'm not suggesting that people who are plus size shouldn't have that. Well, they do. They exercise too. So it's not a matter of, I said own your shape is basically what I said. You've got to have a good fit on what you wear. You've got to be proud of your body line and then embrace it. Don't go in looking sheepish, in other words, because you gained a couple of pounds. You've got to embrace and dance classes and everything else, fencing that keeps you agile.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of these theater companies don't have understudies because they're off-Broadway. So when they cast somebody, they don't expect that casting that particular actor. The actor gets sick during the rehearsal period, and then you've got to go through a quick recast. And it's the same thing with any television series regulars. So keep in good health, and that's really a very important axiom. Now, as far as teeth are concerned, it's interesting because I've studied a lot of 19th century actresses and the photographs taken of them. And you'll see in a lot of those pictures that you rarely see teeth, that their mouths are closed like the Mona Lisa. And so there's an article that just appeared, I found it online, about Smirk or Smile is the name of the piece, and they talk about the artists that painted these great women during the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, and the expression was from their mouth, and was the mouth open or closed, and most of them would do a closed mouth. So when I started looking at the great actresses of the late 19th century on up, and saw that all of their mouths were closed, I thought, it was about the dental hygiene of the period. And the lack of good food, the lack of water perhaps, the lack of, being able to brush every day, whatever, weak gums, teeth would fall out. Well, what are you going to do? They say George Washington had a set of wood dentures, which makes me cringe, but there wasn't the proper dental care. It's got to be said. And so if you don't have the proper dental care, as you age in particular, your teeth start to hurt or they get abscessed or whatever, so the gums, and so you have to have yearly checkups or whatever. And my feeling was that the ladies did not, the beautiful ladies in particular, did not want their audiences to know that a tooth was missing, or teeth were crooked, or there was a space between the front teeth, et cetera, et cetera. And when you're on stage in a theater that houses 1,500 people, you can't see their teeth.
True.
So they were, and then of course they must have found ways to camouflage it. I often think that ladies used fans just to hide their teeth from other people. I don't know. That's just my crazy sense of humor. But aren't we lucky that inventions in medicine and healthcare and dental care evolved during the late 19th century, and it wasn't so painful. When you look at rural areas, oh my Lord, they must have really been in pain, and then they just take a plier and pull it out. It doesn't make me happy that this happened to people, but with modern technology and as they improved, even Novocaine or something to relieve the pain from the procedure. And a lot of these actors didn't have money for dentists, by the way. Their salaries were maybe, if lucky, $8 a week. So you have to look at the financial consequences of not being able to afford dental care. And that's basically what happened. But as with anything, you learn how to adapt to the circumstance. Therefore, and also you as a photographer know the history of photography. And they had flashes, and they put them in studios, and they posed everybody, and all of that. You look at political leaders and people of note, literary figures, and I look at that stuff all the time on Wikipedia. And most of the pictures you see of the great people from the 19th and early 20th century are not smiling.
Yeah.
It just wasn't done. It was not advisable. Let me put it that way. And lucky to those actresses who were born with good, strong teeth, who could imagine, because when we got into pictures now, when we got into silent films and talkies, you're looking at people moving their mouths up close. So do they have, and they were smiling a lot, and so, there was a big transition there in terms of makeup techniques and certainly false teeth if they needed it. I know that Clark Gable had false teeth, for instance. He had bad teeth, so probably he was the happiest at home when he could take out the teeth. I know that's a kind of veering from the subject, but I think you get the point of what I'm saying. And in spite of physical problems like bad teeth and maybe some debilitation in the body because of lack of medical care, the actors who survived were the ones that we look at now as being brilliant and examples of longevity and survival in this business. But today, by today's standards, if you are embarrassed to smile because your teeth aren't good, and I can attest for myself that I have a terrific bridge in my front teeth now. The bridge was made for me by a brilliant dentist, and I've had it for 20 years. 20. I beat the records because I didn't like my upper teeth. There was like what we call a snaggle tooth, one tooth over the other. But I could camouflage it by not doing a big grin, okay?
Yeah.
So we all go through the necessities of this, and we feel much more confident. Look at all those commercials for smiling on TV. Now that they have this beautiful smile and these implants and all of that, they feel like they can be the life of the party. So it does have a psychological impact on you. But I think that today's actor is far luckier than the ones from the older years of the 19th century. So I'm sure that is probably too long an answer, but you get the drift.
Yeah, no, that's good. We're ready to move beyond now the physical stuff and start talking a little bit about like marketing and networking. And my next question is actually related. You sort of, said that you did this by joining up in a casting agency when you were an actor. But in your book, you mentioned that actors can reach out to casting directors and ask if they could be a reader for them. And my question is, like, how would be the right way to go about doing that? What do you recommend for an actor who wants to do reading?
Well, in How to Be, we do mention a couple of actors who got into casting offices because the casting directors knew their work and didn't have any roles for them, but thought they're such good actors and they'll help the actor auditioning. What happens with readers is that, and particularly for a stage audition, sometimes it's the stage manager who's not an actor, and that throws the actor off. You need somebody who can give the actor the talent of that reader, can then connect in the scene with the actor auditioning. And so that the casting person looking at that scene, looking at that audition, can assess the quality of the actor much better. But if you have somebody in the room, and I have to admit, there is a stipend for being a reader, which they should get. Sometimes, though, people volunteer to be readers. They don't care if they get paid anything or not. They just like the experience of the audition, and also being in front of a casting director, and hopefully that casting director will remember you when the right role comes along.
Yeah.
So it's really important that the readers, that if you want to be a reader, and I think we said it in that edition, is just contact the casting offices and say you're a trained actor and that you've done such and such and such, and that if they need a reader for any upcoming auditions, to put them on a list. Mm-hmm. Because, you have to have a list of available readers, because sometimes the ones that you want aren't available because hopefully they're working. It's great experience, by the way. It's absolutely great experience. I used readers a lot when I was doing soap auditions. And sometimes we got a loser, but most of the time the casting offices would supply some really good actors. In fact, one of the principals from General Hospital out in California years ago, wonderful actress, the casting director brought in actors to read with her because she was a pro. She was a contract player. And so she could also be part of the input, knowing what the soap opera needed and wanted and would respond to.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes actors got a little too aggressive in a kissing scene, which brings me to the point of today's auditions, where you have to get permission now in order to touch another actor. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah, I don't actually know much about that, so if you don't mind talking a little, that would be great.
It's the Me Too movement.
Oh,
I have
yes,
nothing against
okay.
Me Too. I think that we sometimes can go to extremes, though. Mm-hmm. In order to see chemistry between a man and a woman for anything, for an episodic show or a comedy or whatever it is, the writers sometimes would like to see the emotional involvement physically. Now, I don't mean, extreme hugs or bending the guy over or, rough work. I'm talking about kissing gently, or just, holding the hand a bit and looking into the eyes of the other person. Something that is modest, certainly, and not inappropriate. But I know a lot of teachers now who say, Mary Lynn, years ago we never thought this would happen. But now, if we're doing a romantic scene in class, the actors have to get each other's permission to, touch them, just even touching each other. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a bit much, because if I'm a casting director, I first of all would ask the actors if they have a problem. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing I would do. And then we would make an adjustment so that they didn't have to feel that they were being taken advantage of, or that everything was fine with them. Get their permission. That's what I would do first. I mean, in the days when actors were doing bedroom scenes on soap operas, sometimes an actress would not want the role because she'd have to remove some clothing. Mm. So that was part of her religious identity. You can't fight that. I admire that. I admire her for speaking up.
Yeah.
But some people do have a problem, and you have to know what it is. That's all.
Okay. No, that's definitely interesting. With the
new, it is interesting.
With the new Me Too movement
with
and all
the new
that.
Wave.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's really good to be aware of, though, because I didn't even think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, because you know what? People are so emotionally fragile right now, and I just did a workshop. I mean, I was not doing it. I was in a seminar about sexual harassment not long ago. And this lady who was leading the seminar is in charge of a little theater company. And she said that apparently one of the guys that work on her staff, like a tech guy, responded to a female by calling her honey. And she made a big deal about that, this girl. How dare he? You don't call a woman honey any longer. It was diminishing to her. She was making a big flap about it.
Yeah.
And luckily, the woman running the company is like a born mediator. And she got the two of them together in a room and said, okay, let's talk it over.
Yeah.
And it got smoothed. And the guy learned a lesson, and the woman, forgave him whatever she needed to do, and they became friends. So that's the right way to approach it.
Yeah, cool.
But, I don't know how you can get into film anymore without being free physically in some sense. I mean, it's a closed set usually, and everybody respects the principles, but you have to be willing to accommodate what the writer's written.
Yeah, I think
that is really a bad taste in your mouth about it, but then that's the way it goes.
Yeah, I think that's good to be aware of, and I appreciate you bringing that up, that actors who are getting into the industry, they have to know what they're comfortable with, but also know that the less things that they're comfortable with, the more that it could limit their career.
Totally. Thank you.
So I'd like to move into just the question that I get fairly frequently from new actors, and I think that you'd be the perfect person to answer this question based on the content of your book. But how do actors with no resume start getting taken seriously?
Well, that was the first question years ago that I got asked at different colleges. I don't have a lot of stuff on my resume, so what should I do? Well, what I said was, but what is the biggest subject on your resume? Let's look at that first. Well, the training was, the education was. That took up half a page for some because they worked with all these teachers, and that was their prep work as actors. And then you could throw in some skills, some sports that you were good at. Okay, so that takes up a little more. And then if you had done any community theater, regional theater, college theater, whatever, high school I question only because in high school, actors usually are called to play older character roles in musicals that they'll never play in life until they reach the age of that character.
Yeah.
But they have fun. It's a challenge, and they all have fun in high school doing Shakespeare or doing The Music Man, whatever they're doing. And it's all good training, and I hope they all have terrific drama clubs and programs to prepare them for the graduate programs or for undergraduate programs or conservatories. So, I'm trying to get to that point you raise of inexperience. Look, first of all, get some. That's the first thing you do. Go out and try out for things that are not in union jurisdiction. Become a member of a company. That's what networking does. You go around and you see where the off-Broadway pulse beats are, and then you see, what can I do? Some actors will volunteer to be ushers at some of the Broadway houses, or they go to off-Broadway venues like the Vineyard and others that take actors and they give you the playbill when you walk in the room, but they're also seeing the play for free. They're meeting people as they go and making contacts. So you might get another pathway to an audition through those contacts, but you've got to build a resume. And I wouldn't start even sending out my photo or my resume until I had some experience on it. You got to build it first. Like now, if you are in, and I don't know if you read the stuff about the industry showcase, there's a lot of young people come to New York or they go to LA, some stay in Chicago to do industry showcases for agents and casting people, artistic directors locally. I know down in Miami, New World School, the art seniors get to put on their own showcase down there for all the artistic people in the Miami, South Florida area. So that group of industry professionals can see the talent that's in new school and possibly use them in future productions. And that's another way that you start building your resume.
Yeah.
But don't lie. Don't pad. A lot of coaches are out there giving disinformation, which troubles me greatly.
Interesting. Yeah, we don't want to add anything that's fake or make it sound like you were in some sort of production that was way bigger than it actually was. If it was just like a school thing. When you talk a little bit about in your book, like in terms of showcases, if you are going to do these showcases to get people to see you in there, obviously you can build your resume with that, but you want your showcase, if you're ever going to invite a casting director or someone to it, it needs to be really interesting. It needs to be very professional and convenient and very engaging for them, right?
Well, I think first of all, if you're going to showcase your talent, you better have the right scene or monologue prepared.
Sure.
That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Something that you can be cast as, age-wise, physically, etc. I've always given that information to actors. Because sometimes, they think, oh, at 22, I'm going to play so-and-so who's 40 years old. Well, no, that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Give us credit. We're people of the theater. We've seen the plays you're doing scenes from. And if we haven't, we'll know if it's wrong even physically by the dialogue itself and the temperament of the character. That you were way over the top. You weren't interesting. Well, no, I don't want to say the word interesting. It's just that you have to flesh out character. And I did that whole section on analysis. What you have to look for in every character you're going to play.
Yeah.
Then you do a profile of that character. You see if it connects with you. Because right now, the problem, it's not a problem, but it's kind of a qualification, let me put it that way, that you don't have to go from A to Z to impress people, but you find the smaller moments in things to impress people. The quieter part of the character must be inherent in the choice. There must be some humor in the choice. There must be some intellectual understanding of the wit and wisdom of the character. I mean, there are so many things to look for. Today's actors, unfortunately, only skim the surface. So that's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually, this kind of leads perfectly into what I think will probably be the last question, because I want to be respectful of your time. I think I'm trying to remember whether it was in your book or I had spoken about the word like goosebumps for with another person in an interview, but you're always talking about like the casting directors are looking for a very special thing. I think maybe you called it a plus factor or like goosebumps.
It is a plus factor. So that's it.
And what?
That's the plus factor.
Yeah, go into a little bit of detail, like what gives a casting director, like what is that plus factor, and how can casting directors, like how can an actor do a performance that really almost leaves them feeling like goosebumps, where it's like that's the person, like explain that a little bit.
I understand where you're coming from there, and I often talk about the magnetic personality of the actor, the charm of the actor. The personality has a great deal to do with how you impress casting people or talent agents. And the plus factor just simply means you got it or you don't. You can't create it. You can't drink some water to get it. You have to just be in the moment and have this kind of sense of communication to another person that makes them feel your pain if you're doing something tragic, that makes you laugh with them if they're doing something comedic. That just shows the total, it's the total actor again. And most importantly, your dedication to your art. The fact that you come in prepared. The actress I will single out as the perfect example is an actress I'm now currently writing about for my book, and that's Lorette Taylor, who originated Amanda Wingfield in Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie. Unfortunately, Lorette died in 1945 at the peak of her career. But before she did, the great women of theater like Uta Hagen, Julie Harris, all these great women saw her do Amanda 10 times. Because every time they went to that stage, they saw this amazing woman with all this fabulous energy, electricity, not always sticking to script, sometimes veering a little. So you did get spontaneity in her performance, but leaving a lasting, memorable impression that you had just seen greatness. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what it takes. That's really what it takes to survive. But again, some people, just don't have that in them. And that's not their problem. It's not a fault. It's just that I did open calls years ago, like putting actors in a line and just talking to each one of them as I did, hearing their cold reads, sometimes on script, whatever. But you'd always find that one. And we did. We would always find the one. The one would come in and have a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
And we did feel goosebumps, if you will. We did feel this kind of, whew, it was just like, it was all there. We didn't have to work with it. It was there. We didn't have to give it an adjustment, or if we did give it an adjustment, it got better.
Yeah.
You know, I look at actresses of today. I'm doing that, as I said, about Lorette, but I mean, Kate Blanchett does that for me. Judi Dench does that for me. Angela Lansbury does that for me. You can imagine what they were like earlier in their lives when they auditioned for things before they started their own companies or got famous or joined the RSC or whatever. That's what it took. Lynn Redgrave did that for me when she did Shakespeare for my father. It's built in. Ellen Terry did that for the audiences of the 19th century when she did Imogene and Cymbeline. They said it's like her feet never touched the floor.
I like that. It's so interesting, you know. It's like really, I mean, acting and everything. It's all about emotions. It's about like the intangible qualities that the actor brings to the room, and if the actor doesn't do their right preparation, I mean, you had mentioned also that, like, you know, it's not that common. Like, an actor should have their lines memorized if they're coming in, rather than being like looking down at the script the whole time. That just takes them out of it. There's so much work to do, but it really makes a difference.
Yeah, you can't put your head down and up like an apple bobbing. It's be as familiar as you can. I didn't even say be strictly memorized, but know it enough.
Yeah.
Know it enough so you can be comfortable with it and know what's coming next and not freeze.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people are so nervous. There are so many incidents of stage fright out there. You know, before they come in the room, they've got to relax. They've got to learn to breathe better and relax better, and know that that they're going to be, as one of the soap stars I used to know said, for that 5 minutes I'm in that room, that role is mine.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I would like to ask, is there anything else that you want to finish up by saying or talking about briefly? Or is that...
Well, first of all, Uta Hagen's quote, and this is the centennial of Uta Hagen's birth, by the way. She was born in 1919, and there's going to be some kind of celebration of her life sometime this year. Mm-hmm. But she said the one thing that I love, you don't stop learning to act until you're dead. That's what she said, and I got to tell you something. In her later years, she was in a play when she got ill, was in the hospital, and passed on. But she was still acting until God said, "Come here."
Yeah.
So I mean, that's you're in it for the long run. If this is a passing fancy or a whim, or I think I'll try to be an actor. Kind of the airhead view of things, and I loved what. Bobby Hoffman was a great casting director friend of mine years ago. He did all the Gary Marshall series, like Mork and Mindy and Happy Days and those things. And he was a great teacher and a great casting person. He loved actors. But he told me the story of a girl who got up to do a monologue audition. And she said, "And now I'll do a monologue by Samuel French." Well, of course, that met with... gasps and open jaws, because of course she had never done a monologue. She didn't know that Samuel French was a publisher of plays, and so there you go. So if you want to be stupid, just go in and just say something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so true. You have to love what you're doing in any area of life, and especially acting. It's you're either in it 100% or you're never going to really get anywhere with it.
Well, with anything you do, if we look at musicians and dancers and painters and authors, I mean, they give their whole life to what they're doing. That's their focus. And they concentrate on it because they want to share stories. Mm-hmm. And it's the whole bit about storytelling. That's what we're doing as actors. We're telling stories. Yeah. From either our own story or from the stories written down so beautifully by Shakespeare George Bernard Shaw, Henrik Ibsen, Anton Chekhov, or anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing. I'm super excited. A lot of actors, I'm sure, are going to get a ton of value from this, and hopefully this will kind of whet their appetite for the How to Be a Working Actor book, and then when your new book comes out, hopefully they'll get that as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah.